Sister-in-law announced she was pregnant with my husband's baby at Christmas. And manager said I was too pretty to be smart. I took her job. Listen, Courtney, I know you think you're qualified for the senior analytics position, but let's be honest here. You're just too pretty to be taken seriously in a management role. The board would never respect someone who looks like you. Those were the exact words my manager, Patricia Hendricks, said to me on March 15th at 2:47 p.m. in Conference Room B. My name is Courtney Baker. I'm 28 years old, and I work as a data analyst at Morrison Financial Group in downtown Chicago. In that moment, sitting across from the woman I'd trusted and worked under for 3 years, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger. Anger would have been too easy, too temporary. What I felt was focus. I had 2 master's degrees, one in applied mathematics from Northwestern and another in international business from the University of Chicago. I spoke 5 languages fluently: English, Spanish, French, German, and Mandarin. I had generated $2.3 million in cost savings for the company over the past 18 months through my predictive modeling algorithms. But according to Patricia, none of that mattered because I was too pretty to be smart. I simply nodded, thanked her for her time, and walked back to my desk. Patricia probably thought she'd handled me perfectly, kept the pretty girl in her place while positioning herself as the serious, intellectual one. She had no idea what she'd just unleashed. Let me take you back to how I ended up at Morrison Financial Group. 3 years earlier, I'd been recruited straight out of graduate school by Patricia herself. She'd seemed impressed by my academic record and had painted a picture of a company that valued merit above all else. We promote based on performance, not politics, she'd assured me during my interview. For the first year, Patricia was actually a decent manager. She gave me challenging projects and seemed to appreciate my analytical approach. But I started noticing changes around my second year, subtle at first, then increasingly obvious. It began with small comments. Maybe you should dress more conservatively for client meetings, she'd suggest. Or, I think it's better if I present your findings to the executive team. They'll take it more seriously coming from me. I attributed it to her experience and my relative newness to the corporate world. The pattern became clearer during performance reviews. Despite consistently exceeding my targets and receiving glowing feedback from other departments, Patricia would always find ways to dock points. Shows promise, but needs to develop more gravitas, she wrote in my 2022 review. Strong technical skills but lacks leadership presence appeared in 2023. Meanwhile, I watched as male colleagues with similar or lesser qualifications got promoted around me. James Mitchell, who'd started 6 months after me with just a bachelor's degree, was promoted to senior analyst within 18 months. When I asked Patricia about advancement opportunities, she'd give me vague responses about paying your dues and building experience. The breaking point came when the senior analytics manager position opened up in February 2024. It was perfect for me, requiring exactly the kind of cross-functional analysis and international market research that I'd been doing informally for years. I'd literally written 3 of the procedures the new manager would oversee. I spent 2 weeks crafting my application, documenting every project, every cost saving, every innovation I'd brought to the department. I even included letters of recommendation from directors in other divisions who'd worked with me. I was confident this was my moment. That confidence lasted exactly until my meeting with Patricia on March 15th. After Patricia's devastating comment about being too pretty to be smart, I went home and did what any good analyst would do. I gathered data. But this time, the subject of my analysis was Patricia Hendricks herself. I started with publicly available information. Patricia had been with Morrison Financial for 8 years, working her way up from senior analyst to department manager. Her LinkedIn showed a solid but unremarkable career trajectory. What was interesting was what it didn't show. No advanced degrees, no professional certifications, no publications or speaking engagements. Then I dug deeper into company records that I had legitimate access to as part of my role. Patricia's promotion history revealed something curious. Her ascent had accelerated significantly after the arrival of Robert Chen as Chief Financial Officer in 2019. Every major promotion coincided with his tenure. I started paying closer attention to Patricia's behavior and noticed patterns I'd previously ignored. She frequently had working dinners with Robert. She'd name-drop him in conversations. Most tellingly, she'd begun adopting his management philosophy and even his specific phrases in departmental meetings. But I needed more than suspicion. I needed documentation. I began staying late, ostensibly to work on analysis projects, but really to observe. On March 22nd, exactly 1 week after Patricia's crushing comment, I was still at the office at 8:30 p.m. when I saw her leaving Robert's office. She was adjusting her blouse and he was straightening his tie. The optics were interesting. That weekend, I remembered something crucial. As part of my role, I had administrator access to the company's email archiving system for compliance purposes. I'd never used it for anything other than legitimate business needs. But technically, I had the authority to search communications for regulatory compliance reviews. I ran a search query for emails between Patricia and Robert from the past 2 years. What I found made my blood run cold. The email trail painted a picture of systematic discrimination that went far beyond just me. Patricia and Robert had been having an affair for over 2 years, and their correspondence revealed a calculated effort to keep women out of senior positions in our department. From November 2022. Patricia. The new girl Courtney is getting too much attention from the board with her cost-saving reports. We need to manage her visibility. Robert. Agreed. Route future presentations through you. We can't have her getting ideas above her station. From June 2023. Robert. HR is asking why we haven't promoted any women to senior roles lately. We need a strategy. Patricia. Easy. I'll document performance issues. Lack of leadership presence, needs more seasoning, you know the drill. From December 2023. Patricia. Courtney applied for the senior analytics position. Her qualifications are actually perfect for it. Robert. Then we have a problem. Can you handle it? Patricia. Leave it to me. I'll make sure she withdraws her application voluntarily. The most damning email was from March 16th, the day after our meeting. Patricia. Mission accomplished. Told Courtney she's too pretty to be taken seriously. She took it exactly as expected. Quiet and defeated. The position is yours to fill with whoever you want. They'd been planning to give the job to Marcus Webb, Robert's former colleague from his previous company, someone with no prior experience in our industry, but who happened to be Robert's golf buddy. But as I read deeper into their communications, I discovered something even worse. They'd been manipulating budget allocations to make other female employees look incompetent. Janet Morrison in client relations had been struggling for months because Patricia had been secretly reducing her project budgets while maintaining the same deliverable requirements. Sarah Kim in risk assessment had been excluded from key meetings that would have been crucial for her quarterly reports. This wasn't just about me. This was systematic discrimination affecting multiple women across the department. Also Patricia could maintain her position as Robert's inside woman while he consolidated power. I spent the entire weekend printing and organizing evidence. By Sunday night, I had a file with 47 pages of email exchanges, budget manipulation records, and performance review discrepancies that told a clear story of discrimination and corruption. But I knew that simply going to HR wouldn't be enough. Patricia had been careful to follow many formal procedures, and Robert's position as CFO gave him considerable influence over internal investigations. I needed a strategy that would be impossible to ignore or bury. That's when I remembered that Morrison Financial Group was a publicly traded company subject to SEC regulations and Sarbanes-Oxley compliance requirements. The systematic budget manipulation Patricia and Robert had been engaging in wasn't just discrimination, it was financial fraud affecting shareholder reporting. On Monday morning, March 25th, I did something that surprised even me. Instead of my usual business casual attire, I dressed impeccably. A sharp navy suit, minimal but professional makeup, hair in a polished updo. If Patricia wanted to use my appearance against me, I'd make sure I looked exactly like what a senior executive should look like. My first stop wasn't Patricia's office or HR. Instead, I requested a meeting with David Morrison, the company founder's son and current CEO. Getting on his calendar usually took weeks, but I mentioned it was regarding compliance issues affecting SEC reporting, and suddenly he had time that afternoon. At 3 p.m. sharp, I walked into David Morrison's corner office carrying a leather portfolio that contained copies of everything I'd discovered. David was a man in his early 50s who'd built his reputation on ethical business practices and transparency, values that had helped Morrison Financial Group weather several industry scandals. "Ms. Baker," he said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. "I understand you have some compliance concerns." I placed the portfolio on his desk and opened it to the first page, a summary I'd prepared outlining the discrimination pattern, budget manipulation, and potential SEC violations. "Mr. Morrison, I've discovered systematic financial irregularities in my department that I believe constitute securities fraud." For the next hour, I walked him through everything: the discriminatory emails, the budget manipulations, the systematic effort to exclude female employees from advancement opportunities. I explained how the artificial budget constraints had affected project outcomes and, consequently, the financial performance reports that went to the board and shareholders. David's expression grew increasingly serious as we went through the evidence. When we reached Patricia's "too pretty to be smart" comment, his jaw visibly tightened. "Ms. Baker," he said finally, "this is extremely serious. These allegations, if true, represent not only a violation of our company values, but potentially criminal activity. I need to ask, why are you bringing this to me instead of going through normal HR channels?" "Because Robert Chen is the CFO, and these budget manipulations would have required his approval at multiple levels. The HR department reports through a structure that could be influenced by his position. I felt the situation required attention from someone with the authority to investigate independently." David nodded slowly. "What you're telling me is that my CFO and one of my department managers have been systematically defrauding shareholders and discriminating against female employees. The evidence speaks for itself, sir, but I want to be clear. I'm not seeking personal gain from this. I'm seeking accountability." That evening, David Morrison called an emergency meeting with the board of directors. What happened next moved faster than I could have imagined. Morrison Financial Group's board included several former federal prosecutors and SEC officials, people who understood exactly what they were looking at when David presented my evidence. On Tuesday morning, March 26th, the company announced that CFO Robert Chen had been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation into financial irregularities. Patricia Hendricks was also suspended, though the public announcement only mentioned personnel matters. By Wednesday, federal investigators were on site conducting interviews and seizing email servers. It turned out that when you systematically document financial fraud in writing, investigators don't need to work very hard to build a case. I was asked to serve as a witness in the investigation and was granted whistleblower protections. The company also assigned me temporary reporting directly to David Morrison while the department was restructured. On Thursday, March 28th, exactly 2 weeks after Patricia told me I was too pretty to be smart, I was sitting in the same conference, Room B, where she'd tried to crush my dreams. This time, David Morrison was across from me with a very different kind of offer. "Courtney, the board has reviewed your qualifications and your handling of this situation. We'd like to offer you the position of interim department manager while we conduct a search for permanent leadership." I maintained my composure, but inside, I was celebrating. "I appreciate the opportunity, Mr. Morrison. What would the reporting structure look like?" "You'd report directly to me until we hire a new CFO. The board has also authorized a salary adjustment to $127,000, retroactive to March 1st, which I believe was when you should have been promoted originally. It was $31,000 more than my previous salary and $15,000 more than Patricia had been making. There's one more thing," David continued. "We'd like you to head up a company-wide review of our promotion and advancement practices. The board wants to ensure this kind of systematic discrimination never happens again." That afternoon, I was cleaning out Patricia's old office, my new office, when security escorted her in to collect her personal belongings. She looked terrible. The confident, condescending woman who'd tried to put me in my place 2 weeks earlier now looked defeated and desperate. "Courtney," she said quietly as she packed up her desk, "you have to understand, I was just trying to protect you. The corporate world can be brutal for women who stand out too much." I looked at her calmly. "Patricia, you weren't protecting me. You were protecting yourself. There's a difference between standing out and being competent, and you chose to see me as a threat rather than an asset. She tried one more time. This will ruin my career. I have a mortgage, responsibilities. Can't we work something out? You should have thought about that before deciding I was too pretty to be smart. The final chapter of this story played out over the following months. The federal investigation revealed that Patricia and Robert's scheme went back nearly 3 years and had affected 8 different female employees across multiple departments. The budget manipulations had artificially inflated certain departmental performance metrics, which affected shareholder reports, a clear violation of SEC regulations. Robert E. Chen was eventually charged with securities fraud and terminated for cause, forfeiting his severance package. Patricia was fired for discrimination and conspiracy to commit fraud. Both faced civil lawsuits from affected employees, and Robert was looking at potential federal charges. The investigation also revealed that Marcus Webb, the man they'd planned to give my promotion to, had completely fabricated his resume. His previous experience at Robert's former company was actually a 3-month consulting contract where he'd been fired for incompetence. In June, 3 months after my interim appointment, the board offered me the permanent position as department manager. My starting salary was $142,000, more than Patricia had ever made. But the real victory came in the changes we implemented company-wide. I led the development of new advancement protocols that required documented justification for all promotion decisions and created an anonymous reporting system for discrimination concerns. We also implemented blind resume reviews for initial screening and mandatory bias training for all managers. Janet Morrison, who'd been struggling with those artificially reduced budgets, was promoted to senior client relations manager once she had proper resources. Sarah Kim became our new risk assessment director. Both had been top performers all along. They just needed someone to stop sabotaging them. As for the senior analytics manager position that started this whole mess, I filled it with Lisa Park, a brilliant analyst who spoke 3 languages and had an MBA from Wharton. At her interview, I made sure to tell her, "We promote based on competence here, not politics." 6 months later, I was presenting our department's performance to the board of directors. We'd achieved $3.7 million in cost savings, nearly double our previous year's performance. Employee satisfaction scores had increased by 34%, and we'd successfully promoted 6 people based purely on merit. After my presentation, David Morrison pulled me aside. "Courtney, I have to ask, when Patricia made that comment about you being too pretty to be smart, did you know you were going to end up in her job?" I smiled. "Mr. Morrison, I knew I was qualified for advancement, I just didn't know how far I'd have to go to prove it. The truth is, I never set out to destroy Patricia's career or expose a company-wide conspiracy. I simply refused to let someone else's insecurities and prejudices define my worth. In trying to keep me down, Patricia had revealed her own corruption and incompetence. Sometimes karma needs a little help from good documentation and the courage to speak truth to power. Sometimes being too pretty to be smart is exactly the kind of underestimation you need to change everything. My advice to anyone facing similar situations: stay calm, gather evidence, and never let anyone convince you that your competence is somehow diminished by their prejudices. Intelligence and appearance aren't mutually exclusive, and anyone who thinks they are probably isn't smart enough to recognize the combination. Today, I run a department that values merit above all else. Patricia's old office has been redecorated, but I kept one thing exactly the same: the view of Conference Room B, where she tried to crush my dreams and accidentally launched my career. Every morning when I look at that conference room, I remember that sometimes the most devastating thing your enemies can do is underestimate you completely. Patricia thought she was putting me in my place. Instead, she handed me the keys to her kingdom. And yes, I still dress professionally and look exactly the same as I did when she told me I was too pretty to be smart. The difference is, now I'm her boss and everyone knows that beauty and brains aren't mutually exclusive. They're just intimidating to people who have neither.